Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is 1:15 p.m. Washington State time. Today is Tuesday, April 21st, 2020. I am Master Thich, and I would like to extend my warmest greetings to all the people in the country and overseas compatriots. This morning, I am driving to work at the youth center. Can you see that my truck is full of equipment? This truck is used for working. I'm going to repair some of the machines at the youth center during this occasion. While I'm shopping at Home Depot, I like to spend some time sitting in the truck to do a live stream session to answer some questions related to a very hot situation at this moment. I would like to invite you to listen to some of the questions sent by my disciples. The first question they asked me, Dear Master, from the 11th to the 14th day, I don't remember exactly, when Kim Jong-un held a political meeting, you mentioned on a live stream session, Master had said that the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un changed some personnel. However, recently the news and every major U.S. media system, such as Fox, CNN, and many famous newspapers said that Kim Jong-un suffered from a major stroke. Is this true or not? And the story that you told 3 or 4 days ago, sometime last week, that North Korea changed some important personnel in the political bureau, is the reason for the Chinese Communists to harm the North Korean leader for being a loyal servant? Please take a moment to answer this question. We wish you best luck during this pandemic. Ladies and gentlemen, as I mentioned on April 14th, I said that North Korea had changed a number of people in the political bureau. That was over a week ago. Today, there are many disciples emailing to ask me if because Kim Jong-un changed many personnel in the political bureau that made Xi Jinping decide to dispose him. Ladies and gentlemen, that is absolutely not. The youngest sister of the North Korean president, Kim Jong-un, is Kim Yo-jong. Ever since Kim Jong-un inaugurated in North Korea, the youngest sister has been the only trusted person of the North Korean president. She is skillful with many executive leadership and stood behind him. As you can remember, on the trip to Vietnam for the summit meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump, she was the one always behind the president of North Korea. Yo-jong ran the Secretary Guard team to protect her brother. When the North Korean president has suffered a stroke in the past few days because a blood vessel was ruptured and caused internal hemorrhaging in his head. When the North Korean president was admitted to the hospital to remove the clot blood, his younger sister directed the security force for the North Korean president's safety. As of now, the North Korean president Kim Jong-un has recovered and continued to run the country. So this was an accident, and he was already ill. He is only 36 years old, but he is a heavy-set man, and his health was not normal. The brain artery was ruptured to cause internal hemorrhaging, but the clot was removed. He has fully recovered. As you know, when Kim Jong-un inherited the power from his father, he executed his family members, including his uncle-in-law and those influenced by the Chinese communists. On April 11th, he met with his party members and replaced a few officers in the political bureau. After that, he had a stroke, but he has already recovered. Kim went back to work and ran his country. While he was in the hospital, his younger sister sent a very loyal security team to protect Kim Jong-un. This is what I know from my disciples. This is another question. Dear Master, a few days ago, 2 U.S. destroyers have returned to the South China Sea near the Tu Chinh beach. Why are 2 U.S. destroyers present at the South China Sea, while the aircraft carrier Roosevelt withdrew from the South China Sea to return to Guam Island for the isolation of some infected sailors? Why did the U.S. command 2 destroyers in the southeastern sea near the Tu Chinh beach? Please take a moment to answer. Signed by a group of Buddhist followers whom are living in Oregon State. For those who have followed the news, all the radio and internet network have made it clear that Vietnamese communism and Chinese communism were sending official complaints to the United Nations, denouncing each other. China sent a note to the United Nations demanding that Vietnam withdrew from all islands. You should know the Spratly and Parcel Islands are not only 2 main islands, but they are a combination of dozens of islands. At the moment, the Vietnamese communists still occupies about 22 islands in the Parcels and Spratlys. China sent a note to the United Nations demanding that Vietnam withdrew from all islands of the Parcels and Spratly. You should further know that China filed in this note that Vietnam still occupies the Parcels and Spratlys, that is Chinese Spratly and Nasha Islands. This is an act of aggression. The Chinese are robbing and shouting at the same time. You should know that even the Vietnamese diplomatic notes had counter-protests, but it is merely for diplomatic purposes. I will make it clear to you, even if China will occupy all the Parcels and Spratly Islands, the Guac Ma Islands, and take over the remaining 22 islands, the Vietnamese communists still does not care, because that is not their butter and bread. The Vietnamese patriots will be heartache if an inch of their ancestral land is lost, but the Vietnamese communists do not care. But the good news is in the complaint. The Chinese informed that the United Nations to demand the Vietnamese communists to return all the oil rigs that are being exploited in the Tu Chinh beach. Remember this well. China has just sent a note to the United Nations to deliver to the Vietnamese ambassadors to the United Nations, asking the Vietnamese communists to immediately vacate all the oil rigs being exploited. Why did I say that I am happy? Because this is a Vietnamese communist bread and butter. This is where the Vietnamese communists obtained billions of dollars for decades. In the Tu Chinh beach, there are drilling rigs that have oil wells. All the high-ranked leaders like Nguyễn Thắng Đông, Nguyễn Phú Trọng, and Nguyễn Xuân Phúc receive billions of dollars from selling crude oils. All of these men took money from these rigs to build villas and send their children to study abroad. Thanks to the oil pockets that are worth billions of dollars, they become filthy rich. Each year, tens of billions of dollars are profit from selling these oil rigs. These top leaders of the Communist Party used the oil rigs in Tu Chinh Beach to pay for their subordinate officers. For example, if he profits about $10 billion, he will pay a few $1 million to his subordinates. Then his subordinates will give to lower rank personnel a few $100,000, and the chain keeps going on and on. Because of this money, the lower ranked officers keep serving for the higher ranked officers. No matter how many islands China claims in the Parsley and Spratly Islands, as long as they have not yet exploited oil, the Vietnamese communists don't really care. But the Chinese communists sent an official complaint to the United Nations requesting the Vietnamese communists to return all oil rigs that are being exploited in the Tu Chinh area, even though these oil rigs were in Vietnam territories that have been internationally recognized since 1982. Chinese communists want to take over these existing oil wells, including those belonging to petroleum companies of the United States, Russia, and the United Kingdom, and of Spain. That was the reason for the 2 U.S. destroyers present nearby Tu Chinh Beach to protect the U.S. companies that are exploiting crude oil. If the Chinese communist is doing something that causes damage to the U.S. oil companies, the 2 U.S. destroyers will be ready to defend. When the Chinese communists realize that the Vietnamese communists realize that the Chinese communists forced them to hand over all the oil pockets, which will be exploited and delivered, the oil rigs, they are profiting $25 to $30 billion per year. These are Vietnamese communists' primary source of money. As you already know, if someone touches their money, the communists will not hesitate to execute, even if that someone was their own father. They did not hesitate to kill their father and denounce their mother in the past. The Chinese communists will be no exception. The communists are not loyal. For a long time, the Chinese communists still let Vietnam pump oil in the Tu Chinh Beach. That was the way the Chinese controlled the Vietnamese government. Now, the Chinese communists want to take over these oil fields, which are the ATM of the Communist Party of Vietnam. The oil fields are the Vietnamese communist choke point. If they cannot get their money out of these fossil fuels pockets, that will be a big deal to them. I am talking about the Chinese minions who will go against China. I am not talking about those who are pro-American and westernized who want to throw the Chinese regime. Let me tell you this, when the Chinese communists order the Vietnamese communists to hand over the oil rigs being exploited in the Tu Chinh Beach, they are touching their primary income that are the corrupted Vietnamese communists could not afford to lose. $25 billion per year. This $25 billion is the source of money they use to buy homes in the United States. This money also paid for their children to study abroad and entertain on the blood of the compatriots. They don't care about the remaining 22 islands in the Spratly or parcels. They are not interested in Pham Van Dong's resolution to sell the Vietnamese territory water. However, now that China ordered the Vietnamese to give up the oil wells being exploited at the Tu Chinh Beach, and China would use force to regain it if needed. This is the deadly alarm bell for those who worship the Chinese communists. When these Chinese minions lose their source of food, they will stand up to fight against the Chinese. I am not talking about the pro-American side, but the pro-Chinese side will oppose China just like that. The parties that profit from the oil rigs will not release the liquid gold mine in the Tu Chinh beach. So this is a decisive Chinese game, and it makes the tension in the Eastern Sea rise. Liang fleet and oil supplies tankers are in Malaysian waters. 20 Malaysian warships also are in position to defend their territory. The day before yesterday, I said the Chinese fleet was about 500 nautical miles away from Malaysian waters. As of today, they are already facing each other. That is, Chinese warship and Malaysian warships can see each other with their naked eyes, which is around 6 to 10 nautical miles. However, the two sides have not yet opened fire. And this is the reason that the United States had called off the Roosevelt aircraft carriers out of the South China Sea. This is the way to teach those countries to receive support from capitalism countries and still worship communist countries in Southeast Asia such as Thailand. Second is Singapore. Malaysia is the fourth, Indonesia, and finally Vietnam. Vietnam has now been given a diplomatic note to hand over Spratly and Parsley Islands and the remaining occupied islands, including exploited oil fields. It is a hot situation at Tu Chinh Beach. If Vietnam doesn't have the support from the United States, it won't able to cope with the firepower of Chinese communists. It will be the reason Vietnam could no longer receive aid from the United States and sell oil from Tu Chinh Beach to its own pocket. Now, the Chinese communists take over the Tu Chinh Beach to cut off the main source of income. If the Chinese communists takes away the Vietnamese communist wallet, they will no longer be loyal to Chinese. These henchmen who are loyal to the Chinese communists who are taking billions of dollars every year will no longer have that money. They are the one who will become anti-Chinese communism. You will see the war will happen someday, not far from now. The Malaysian Navy and the Chinese communists are facing each other. Just a single gunshot arises between Malaysia and Chinese Navy. Countries like Singapore, then Indonesia will be under attack as well. The front line in Malaysia, then Chinese will not hesitate to shoot an Indonesian island, and then all the countries in Southeast Asia. These countries still haven't chosen either Chinese or the United States. From the past until now, the United States has not compensated any island of the Southeast Asian countries. Only the Chinese Communists has occupied both the Parsley and Spratly Islands of Vietnam and occupied the Philippines' Mischief Island. China is bringing its naval fleet to occupy a number of Malaysian islands. This is the opportunity for the United States to make those Southeast Asian countries to be transparent. They can't keep accepting support and trading with the United States while still doing business with the Chinese communists. That is the view of Master Thong. So you can see the situation much more clearly now. When the Chinese communists reach the oil fields in the Tu Chinh Beach, I am glad not because I am the type of person who wants to see the nation lose the sea and the island. I am happy because the Vietnamese communists lost their primary source of income. The Chinese communists took away so many of the Parsley Islands. The Vietnamese still do not care because there was no obvious income there. Although these islands have potential for oil and gas harvesting, However, the exploited oil wells in Tu Chinh Beach are helping the communists in the political bureau become billionaires. They make billions of dollars every year from oils and gas fields. So the fight will take place. The innocent American deaths are around 50,000. According to the US CDC, by the end of April, this number can reach 70 to 80,000. And by the end of May, the numbers can reach its peak, which is around 140,000. 140,000 innocent lives. This is the reason the President of the United States, he said openly at the press conference with the Chinese communists will have to pay a very expensive price. He repeated this many times. President Trump publicly said that the Chinese communists is left alone for now until the United States stabilizes this pandemic. Those were the words of the President of the United States at the press conference. He further openly publicized and condemned those countries that still support the Chinese communists. As you can clearly see in the G7 meeting 10 days ago, because it is coronavirus flu season, so the G7 countries did not have an in-person meeting like they did every year in a certain country. This year, they met through an online conference. In this meeting, the German chancellor is still defending the Chinese communists and the WHO. After a few days, as soon as President Trump declared the Chinese communists would pay a hefty price for tens of thousands of Americans' lives and hundreds of thousands of innocent people in the world. In addition, the United States will not ignore the damage caused by the Chinese communists. She panicked and immediately gave a bill, not a lawsuit, to Xi Jinping to reimburse hundreds of millions due to the economic loss. It was suggesting that she is no longer siding with both China and the United States. I also want to remind you that when the trade war between the United States and Communist China occurred, Xi Jinping sent Chinese ambassadors to other countries in the world to ask these countries to join in the One Belt Road of Chinese communists. Any country that do not participate, such as the United States, the Chinese ambassador will warn the special envoy of the United States. If the United States is against this program, then the United States will have to pay a very expensive price in the end. At the end, I thought that the Chinese communists perhaps had more powerful atomic weapons because they bluntly challenged the United States. Many countries refuse to do business with China, nor use Huawei's equipment and G5 programs. And Chinese communists did not hesitate to threaten the countries to watch out and pay a very high price. They behaved more like a thug instead of an ambassador. In my heart, I thought maybe the Chinese communists had some secret weapon, so it was not afraid of the United States. Every time anybody wants to terminate a business contract with Huawei or business with the Chinese public, they were all threatened to pay a very high price. I thought China must have some super weapon. Now that the pandemic occurred, I knew why Chinese communists threatened the world, including the United States, United Kingdom, and other superpower countries. The Chinese communists plan to have a program to use bioviral weapons. It is even more obvious now that Chinese communists are asking the rest of the world to congratulate Xi Jinping for succeeding in blocking the coronavirus. You have to understand this message. A week ago, I said that Chinese communists blocked the Wuhan resident from going to Beijing, not allow Hubei people to go to Hunan province, not allow Chinese people to go to Shanghai. They banned their people from traveling inside the country, but allow their people to travel freely to New York, San Francisco, to 50 US states, Italy, Spain, Europe, and hundreds of countries in the world. Xi Jinping directed his staff to tell other countries to congratulate him on succeeding to stop the pandemic in the country and spreading the pandemic around the world to devastate mankind. Recently, the Chinese spokesman was panicking to ask the world not to treat the Chinese communists as an enemy. Don't condemn the Chinese communists. Don't sue the Chinese communists, and so on. He blamed it all due to the coronavirus, not the Chinese communists. Xi Jinping and the Chinese communists played the game wrongly. They tried to use those viral weapons to destroy the world, but they helped the world to see clearly the cruel side of Xi Jinping. He does not have any other way to live on. Xi Jinping first had to create a war to disperse the public opinion, so he could regain control of the army. Without an army, he would be overthrown. China has two scenarios. One, if Xi Jinping sends troops to attack foreign countries and loses, he will be responsible and pay hundreds of billions to the world, such as India, the United States, the British, France, Germany, South Korea, and all other countries. China will be asked to reimburse the damage, and it cannot pay. It would be considered as dead. In the second scenario, a coup happens in the country. Xi Jinping will be arrested and get blamed as the sole person who was responsible. These rebellion generals change and declare as patriots so they don't compensate for the damages from the coronavirus. Tibet will be independent, Mongolia independent, Uyghur also independent. China will be torn into many pieces. Many people ask me who will be responsible to compensate for the damages. If Xi Jinping creates a war in Taiwan, or in the Southeast Sea and loses, then Xi Jinping will sign the surrendering agreement to pay war compensation, along with the coronavirus damage compensation. However, if a civil war happens and disposes Xi Jinping, the new government will not blame Xi Jinping. How would other countries receive their compensation? Well, the international will get to this. China will still be sustainable, even though at the time China becomes 3 to 4 small countries, just like in the Qing dynasty. At that time, China was divided into 4 to 5 countries. Each small country divided had to hand over a number of colonies to compensate for the war. For example, England had Hong Kong Island, and Portugal had Macau Island. Whether China will be torn apart or stay as one, it must hand over a number of colonies for the damaged countries. The United States can exploit some islands within 100 years or 200 years to deduct the debt. More colonies will be given to England, Germany, Japan, India to compensate for this coronavirus disaster. The bottom line is the Chinese communists has no other way out. Once again, we are Vietnamese. We must take advantage of this opportunity. President Trump is determined to destroy the Chinese communists. If Chinese communists die, their fraction would also be killed. I personally want this war to happen as soon as possible, so less Vietnamese will likely die. The longer it takes for the war to happen, the more Vietnamese people will suffer. The sooner Xi Jinping starts the war, the earlier the Chinese communists will be crushed by the coalition of troops. At that time, the leaders of the Chinese Communist Army stationed in Vietnam will take advantage of Xi Jinping losing his command. These leaders will emerge to claim their own authorities. They will no longer obey Beijing's order, and with the division in Vietnam, they will capture all the regional commanders of the Vietnamese communism. They will clash and kill the Vietnamese People's Army to protect its security. As you already know, for a long time, the Vietnamese People's Army was always weak and cowardly. They always have the idea of surrendering to Chinese communists. Only some of the patriotic soldiers would fight back. Once the Chinese division destroyed all the Vietnamese People's Army, they will kill all Vietnamese youth. Many Vietnamese will die. The Vietnamese history will reset back to 1,000 years of domination by the Chinese, back to the time of two Thong sisters from the Trung Trac Trung Nhi period. The Chinese will kill numerous Vietnamese people. Once the Vietnamese have no other way, they would stand up and fight back. They would guerrilla fight, and they would destroy and destroy the Chinese communists. Based on my American friend's prediction, if Xi Jinping hesitates and does not start a war, instead waiting for the country to coup, each military will rise and claim their own region. Cang Dang, Cang Zi, Hubei, Shizheng, Beijing will command their own military district. Those leaders who are commanding the Chinese army in the special economic zone in Vietnam will not foolishly serve for Cang Dang or any other military region. Because Vietnam is still a rice barn and bank vault, these leaders will stand up to declare independence and will not obey orders from the Chinese Political Bureau. The first thing they will do is eliminate the 5 million Vietnamese generals and soldiers. However, the 5 million soldiers are not crazy enough to get killed easily. It creates a war in Vietnam, and the number of deaths will be high. The Chinese division will also kill the young Vietnamese at that time. It would kill a lot of Vietnamese to protect its seizures of government. That was a prediction of my American friend. They told me that the sooner the war happens, the lesser Vietnamese will die. Surely, if the war between the United States and the Chinese Communists does not take place sooner, the Vietnamese would suffer a lot more. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are Vietnamese. We don't want the country of Vietnam to lose any inch of land and sea. We can clearly see that the Chinese Communist has given a note to reclaim the oil and gas rigs in the Tu Chinh beach. It will take away the pocket money of those servers serving for the Chinese Communists. To the communists, if you have money and you have disciples, as soon you run out of money, there will be no friendship. These Chinese mediums automatically make a riot because they have nothing to eat. Loyalty does not exist with an empty stomach. Waiting Fu Trung is no longer a valuable chess piece for Chinese communists. It doesn't matter if he is dead or alive. Waiting Fu Trung doesn't have a voice. He doesn't go to meetings. At the moment, there are 2 to 3 factions in Vietnam. The anti-communist faction in the south of Vietnam is very strong, and they don't want to serve the Chinese communists. Those who remain loyal to the Chinese communists are Nguyen Phu Trung's faction. The third faction, as you know, will be the one that replaces Nguyen Phu Trung. This faction will take over the political bureau. However, in the Communist Political Bureau, there are some who remain loyal to the General Secretary, Nguyen Phu Trung. There are also some that rely on the power of free country, led by the United States. In order to defend our country, as the Vietnamese in the United States, we need to vote for President Trump. In the upcoming April 30th, many associations will hold memorial events to mourn national hatred, to curse the communists. It has been 45 years. We can continue to do that. But from a personal view, we can curse the communists. We mourn the 5 generals of the Republic of Vietnam: Nguyễn Cam Nam, Phạm Văn Phú, Truong Văn Hai, Lý Nguyễn Vây, Colonel Hảo, Ngọc Khang, and several hundred thousands of Republican soldiers who had died on April 30th, 1975. All of that is absolutely right, but we can't just mourn. We must turn grief into action. What kind of action? We can't organize an army in the United States. We can do nothing besides broadcast patriotic media, television, and forums. But we can convince the 4 million Vietnamese in the United States, which have around 500,000 possible U.S. citizenship, to vote for the U.S. President Donald Trump, to vote for a Republican congressman. Please look closely at Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House. She did not say something to console the 40,000 American compatriots who died from the coronavirus. Did you hear her say anything to condemn the Chinese communists? On January 27, 2020, the day President Donald Trump ordered the closure of all the flights from China to enter the United States, Nancy Pelosi was in San Francisco, joined with the Chinese communists to oppose President Donald Trump for violating human rights. At that time, she announced that the epidemic was not severe because the director of the WHO had not declared a global pandemic. Why did the President of the United States so hastily close its border? Today, in the hot situation, she is the third character who can lead the United States if both the President and the Vice President of the United States died of coronavirus. And these 2 people are never separated in the press conference. Sometimes I admire these 2 people who are too patriotic and forget their own lives. Other leaders of the country never dare to stand up together. In 2001, when bin Laden attacked 2 skyscraper buildings, President Bush also separated himself in one place and the vice president also separated in another place. In case one died, the other will survive to lead the country. President Donald Trump and the Vice President of the United States always work shoulder to shoulder, always meeting with the press to run the Corona Task Force. Ladies and gentlemen, if these two Republicans were killed, the Democratic Party would take over the White House. So sometimes I find myself very worried, but I think they are blessed because of their care for their people. Meanwhile, Nancy Pelosi went out there and here. She brought out a series of expensive ice cream in her expensive refrigerator. She boosted that she was eating ice cream and enjoying vacation. So you can clearly see that the vulnerable president of the United States is working day and night. The Speaker of the House will take over the White House if the president and the vice president dies. What did she do for the United States? She didn't even have a word to comfort American people who have died because of the Chinese Communist Party's embrace of suicide bomb attacks on the U.S. soil. So once again, this upcoming April 30th, if we want the Vietnamese people in the country not to suffer because of the communists, we have to use our power through the ballot. Supporting the Republican Party is attacking Xi Jinping and destroying the Vietnamese communists. Xi Jinping dies, the Chinese communist dies, and the Vietnamese communists will also die. Therefore, this April 30th, I appeal to all organizations that are preparing online to turn the pain into action. We don't just have meetings and curse the Vietnamese communists, and then we mourn and do nothing. We can do something because in the upcoming election season, we have to support the Republican Party, support the President of the United States. Do you know that if the Democratic won because of illegal immigration, do you know what illegal immigration is? If we want to vote, we have to register. We then have a book to tell us where to go. The ballot administration will send us paper with directions. For example, people who live in San Jose, zip code 95122, they will tell us which polling place we will go to, which polling place to go to if we live in the zip code 95108. I will do the same. We need to have time to register and check nationality. However, we could clearly see the Democratic cheating during the semi-term election of the Senate and the House of Representatives. The Democratic cheated with illegal immigrants who do not have regular IDs. As long as they have their IDs, they have the right to vote. These illegal immigrants wait until the last day to vote. There was also a lot of contraband. The President of the United States has ordered real IDs to vote. To have a real ID, you must have a passport and a green card, and must have a utility bill. The real ID prevents the Democratic Party from taking advantage of the illegal immigration problem. In California, illegal immigration still have their ID. The governor in California and New York cut $110 million that President Donald Trump proposed for small businesses like restaurants and nail salons to lend with very low interest to survive this pandemic. Nancy Pelosi disapproved with the reason that she had to transfer this money to provide support for illegal immigrants. Each illegal immigrants will receive $500 in California. Every month, taxpayers such as nail salons and restaurant owners pay taxes. We have tax records. The U.S. Immigration Department, they also have records. They send taxpayers $1,200. The illegal immigrants don't have addresses. They don't have social security numbers. The government has no way to contact these immigrants. They line up at San Jose City to receive $500. Then they went to San Diego to receive another $500. Then they would go to San Francisco to receive another $500. Why did the governor of California determine to give this money to illegal immigrants? Because doing so will get more illegal voters. Did you know because of this pandemic, the date of exchange of real IDs with passport and green cards have been rescheduled until May next year instead of October this year? Everyone who wants to fly must have a real ID. The current driver's license will not work, so that is the Republicans' way to purge people from voting illegally. However, because of this pandemic, the Democratic voted to postpone the date of real ID until May 2021. Illegal immigrants do not pay taxes, yet demand the money from the taxpayers of the American people. We, Vietnamese American, we have the right to vote for Republican Party. We have to use every means so that President Trump can stay in the White House for another term, so that we destroy the Chinese communists and the Vietnamese communists. Respectfully yours, I hope you will put your country above other personal benefits. Our enemy is the Chinese communists, the Vietnamese communists, and their minions. Your warmest regards, Master Thich Lai.